And there's always, and it's the same with games. There's like, okay, there's the cheaters, and then there's also the poor Linux user who just wants just wants to run this Windows only software and is stuck because
Mhm.
he's in the same bin.
Right. Yeah, I understand why game developers are wary of it. The one that I always find very amusing though is with Fortnite. Like
Yeah.
the Epic makes the anti-cheat they're willing to sell to customers and sell them also the Linux support, but they don't want to use it themselves, which at least to me does not give me great confidence in how they feel about their anti-cheat.
Oh well, I mean, I can only say I can only say what the cheating community thinks, but the reality, and I did want to talk about this, of
Mhm,
wine anti-cheat is it exists
mhm,
because there are developers who want to buy it. It doesn't exist because it's of any value. The problem, okay, there, because wine isn't an emulator or virtual machine, but it functionally in many ways does allow some obscuring. So
mhm,
the problem is, the lead developer of Riot Vanguard put it well. On a Linux system, functionally, the whole system could pretty much be a cheat.
mhm.
And with wine, I mean, you can modify wine. You can hook. You can put like you can. When I say hook, I mean you can. And if you've ever done wine development, you've done this where you can add like a print statement into wine, where every time a function is called, it's printed.
Mhm.
And in doing that, you can do things, all sorts of things in wine. So the reality, yeah, I don't think Epic believes that easy anti-cheat wine is effective, because it's very easy to get around. Like you can just have a Linux user mode process that can easily read Wine's memory, and while Wine processes, there's an interface for it. I
Mhm.
just don't think it's something they put a lot of thought into.
Mhm. Mhm. So
But
if
with the Steam Deck,
oh yeah,
they
go on.
wanted like I was just saying, with the Steam Deck, developers wanted to be on it, so they enabled it.
Mhm. Right, right. But it's just not. If you wanted to have something that was actually effective as it would be on Windows, you would need to sort of make some guarantees about the system, like guarantees about what kernel's running, guarantees
Yeah,
about
oh, absolutely.
yeah, guarantees about like
And
a
I
specific
mean,
version of Wine, probably.
that would be helpful. Well, what I would do, okay, I actually think the biggest problem is just the architecture of the anti-cheat.
Mhm,
Like, it's not impossible to make a user level anti-cheat that works, but
mhm,
it is impossible to take a kernel anti-cheat, remove the kernel driver, and have an anti-cheat that is functional.
right.
Like, for example, before Riot used Vanguard on League of Legends, they had something called Pac-Man.
Mhm,
And the way that one worked very differently. Rather than trying to catch every introspection into its memory, it just made it near impossible to understand what the game was doing, and it did a lot of weird stuff to the execution.
mhm,
So an approach like that can be quite sustainable. But the problem with something like EAC for Linux is they haven't done any of that work. They've just taken this and kind of tried to make it work.
mhm,
So it's a difficult thing because the only way to get good results would be to put as much effort into making a good Linux anti-cheat as you did a Windows one. But that's a lot of R&D money.
mhm. For a fairly small market share, like really.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think on Steam it's about 4%, and in a lot of games that can be quite varied.
Mhm.
And also, realistically, like the Steam Deck, which is a big part of that, I just maybe I'm wrong. I think the Steam Deck is not usually something you're using for competitive games. It's not to the same extent.
The only yeah, obviously like there's Fortnite on phones, so people would want to play it like
Yeah, no,
Fortnite
you're
on that
right.
as well. But yeah, usually when people talk about playing games on the Steam Deck, it's like single player experiences. If it is something multiplayer, usually it's like a co-op game or
Yeah,
maybe some like light competitive game, but you're not playing like Apex on it or like
no,
Warzone if that was a thing you could do either.
no. I think that is yeah, and then a lot of game developers, and of course, Linux users are not going to agree, but a lot of game developers then think in terms of PCs. Well, they can just install a second partition.
Mhm. Right. Actually, well, when it comes to anti-cheat as well, a lot of people bring up how it works over on the macOS side. Because my understanding there is they don't allow the same level kernel level anti-cheat that you have on Windows.
No, there's no kernel. So there's a few things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
To my understanding, there is like a pretty good like user mode, as in user to API for that. The big thing is it's going to be functionally impossible to make good cheats, and Mac doesn't have a lot of games, to be fair. Like Riot is kind of the odd one out there, but it's going to be very, very difficult to make cheats that are useful on Mac without disabling security features, and you can just mandate those security features. And yeah, getting stuff into the kernel is very difficult. They don't allow it, and it's substantially more difficult to install unsigned drivers on a Mac. So yeah, no, it is different. I think as well, Mac in gaming is smaller than Linux, so it's really and of course, like you can just if you want to use Linux, right, you can just install it. Not that many cheaters, although some are pretty dedicated, are going to go and buy a Mac. I think is the assumption. Could happen.
It's very that's a lot more of a problem if you get it hardware banned on a Mac. Like that's a pretty big investment to deal with that problem.
Yeah, you'd be you'd be stealing mom's credit card to buy a new Mac is going to be a pretty big investment.